Hey, what's going on there, YouTubers? So, Adjumancinnajob here with another instructional video. So, today we are going to be looking at the sealed deck format in Limited, and we are going to be discussing today how to actually build a sealed deck from 6 packs. Now, oftentimes whenever you're going to be going to a pre-release of a new set that's going to be coming out, the format that's going to be played at the pre-release is going to be sealed decks. So you're going to get 6 of these packs of whichever set the release is going to be. In this case, we're going to be using M13 packs. The core set packs are better for newer players. They're much more straightforward, whereas the expansion packs would be a little bit more complex. They have a little bit more complex mechanics that work around the cards and interactions and stuff like that. But for this video, we're going to be using core set M13, and we're going to be going over how to make a limited sealed deck out of these 6 packs and our lands that we have up here. So a few things to remember about the limited format and especially sealed deck is whenever you get your 6 packs, you are going to construct a 40 card deck. The rest of the cards that you pull out of your 6 packs that aren't in your 40 card deck or more, the minimum is 40. There's no maximum in the total amount of cards that you have to have, but the minimum is 40. The rest of the cards that you're not using in your deck are considered to be in your sideboard. So between games 1 and 2 and then games 2 and 3, you're able to actually switch out cards from your main deck and your sideboard and make appropriate switches between what you want to use against your opponent. Now, another thing that you guys want to remember is, unlike the constructed format with Magic, there is no 4-copy restriction to playing this format. So if you guys pull 5 copies of one card, you are actually able to run all 5 of those copies, whereas in constructed, you're restricted to only being able to run 4 of a certain card with the same name. So, except for basic lands. But we're going to go over today how to make a sealed deck. I have 6 of these packs here, and while they are not actually sealed packs, these 6 packs are coming from the daily pack openings that I have on my channel. So if you guys are unfamiliar with what I do with these daily packs, I open them and I dissect them for drafting as a limited format, and we talk about different cards that would be good for drafting and in what order. And if you guys are curious which specific packs these are, they are packs 222, 223, 226, 228, 229, and 230. Those are the episode numbers of these packs. They're not in order, but I chose these packs because they didn't have very overwhelming rares in here. It would kind of defeat the purpose if I just threw in packs where I got like a Sublime Archangel or something like that, something ridiculous. We want to take an overview of these packs based on pretty average rares and build the best deck out of it. So with all that said, the other thing you want to remember is lands. So the shop that you're going to be playing at is supposed to provide basic lands, but for most events, when I'm going to a limited event, I will bring 17 of each land for my own use. So whenever you're playing limited in a 40-card deck, the average amount of lands you want in your deck is going to be 17. So we're just running 17 of each as a normal kind of number. And we just use whatever we use, and the rest of it's going to be in our sideboard. So now we are going to jump in and take a look at what we're going to be doing with these packs. Okay, so now that we have everything cleared out of the way here, we're going to be taking a look at each separate pack, and we're going to break it down into each separate color. So we're going to grab a pack, and we are just going to sort the card by color. And that's the first thing that you want to do whenever you're building a deck for limited, a sealed deck especially. So we're just going to go through and separate these by color. So for you guys that watch the daily pack episodes on the channel, these cards should be fairly familiar. Especially some packs might stand out to other people if they remember them, if they remember commenting on them and about them. Alright, so that's our first pack. Our second pack here. We have Negate, which is a good card. Hydro Surge is good filler. And I'll get more into details about the specific lingo with stuff. Johnny Sunstriker is a good card. Another Primal Hunt Beast. Welkin Turn. Krankos Command. Veilborn Ghoul. We have Ring of Zathrid, which is an artifact. We're going to put that up there. Cleaver Riot. Boundless Realms. And like I said, I tried to get packs that were pretty average for rares. Nothing overwhelming. So we have Mind Rot, Safe Passage, Archaeomancer, Warclamp Mastiff, Index, and Divination. Reckless Brute, Zombie Goliath, Yaba's Force Mage, Crippling Blight, another Ring of Thune, Crusader of Odric, Elixir of Immortality, Predatory Rampage, Safe Passage, another Archaeomancer, Rummaging Goblins, Kraken Hatchling, Playtesting Boar, which I really like this card, Deadly Recluse, Angel's Mercy, Walking Corpse, Goblin Arsonist, Bountiful Harvest, Acidic Slime, Phyrexian Hulk, Monvoli Beast Tracker, and Sphinx of Uthune for that rare. Fairly decent one for limited. Another Archaeomancer, Guardians of Akrasa, Mog, Flunkies, Turn to Slag, Angel's Mercy, Zombie Goliath, Timberpack Wolf, Canyon Minotaur, Giant Scorpion, Windrake, another Ring of Colonia, Angelic Benediction, Kite Sail, Wit's End. And feel free to check the pack episodes if you guys feel that I'm adding in cards that weren't in the pack opening episodes whenever I actually opened them, because I took them exactly as they were opened and just rebuilt the packs. And we have this one with Kindled Fury, Ranger's Path, Silvercoat Line, and other Mog Flunkies, Fire Elemental, Warclamp Mastiff, Goblin Arsonist, Battleflight Eagle, Bond Beetle, Divine Verdict, Aven Arctic Aven, Vampire Nighthawk, which is an awesome card, Revive, and Phylactery Lich. Alright, so now that we have everything sorted out here, we want to remember the basic format of sorting cards whenever it comes to limited, and that is bread. So if you guys are unfamiliar with bread, it is a breakdown of terms in which you are going to be sorting cards based on their overall strength in the limited format. So bread breaks down into BREAD. B for bombs, R for removal, E for evasion, and the A and D they just really differentiate between person to person, but the way that I look at A and D is A is aggro/attackers, and D is overall just draw and kind of the more dead cards. It's mainly filler, but it's pretty much everything else that we want to save for the end. So that is our breakdown of bread. So once we have everything sorted out, we're going to take a look at each color individually, and we are going to look at the good cards that we have here and just try to break them down for what they're worth. So the first thing that I like to do whenever I have each color is separate them between creatures and instants and sorceries and enchantments. So we're going to get all of our creatures out of the way here and take a look at all the creatures that we could possibly be using. So we have a lot of Archaeomancers. Archaeomancer is a great card. Lots of flying creatures, and evasion is otherwise known as any way for creatures to be able to attack your opponent without being blocked or answered, and flying is one of those types of evasion, which is really important. Fogbank, which is another awesome card, Windrake again, and Harbor Serpent. So For our instants and sorceries, we have Negate, Hydro Surge, Divination, and Index. Now, not all of these cards are going to be right at the top of deck building where we need to have them. They're not going to be auto-include cards as soon as we're building our deck. Negate's definitely a card that you want to save. You don't really know that you're going to need it, and this is more of a card where you're going to be using it game 2, game 3, especially if you know that your opponent's using a lot of non-creature spells. Divination is a very good card for filler. We like to build up our deck first with our creatures, our big bombs, our evasion and removal, and then kind of save spells like Divination for last whenever we're constructing our deck. Same goes for Index. It's a really good card, pretty much the same way of operating around it as Divination. And Hydro Surge, pretty much the same thing. It's a filler card that you want to save for the end. Alright, so those are our instants and sorceries for blue. For our creatures, we actually have a lot of really solid creatures out of these packs. So we have Archaeomancers. So we have 3 Archaeomancers. So these will let us get back our instants and sorceries that are in the grave whenever he comes out. And he's a pretty balanced creature because he's 4 mana to get back our stuff from our grave, which is going to be, it's going to come in handy. Also, we have Windrake, which has flying, which is very important. So we actually have 3 of those as well. Even though he's 3 mana, having a 2/2 flying creature he can deal a lot of sizable damage. So we have 3 of those. Harbor Serpent, if we're running heavy blue, we can take advantage of his island walk, and he can't attack unless there are 5 or more islands on the battlefield, which if we're running heavy blue, he's going to come in handy. Fogbank is a good creature card. It's a 0/2 for 2 mana. It has flying, defender, and you get to prevent all damage dealt by Fogbank and to Fogbank. We have 1 Welkin turn, so pretty much the same thing as Windrake. It has evasion. It can only block creatures with flying. That's the only downside, but it is a 2/1 for 2 mana. You can get it out very quick. Kraken Hatchling, this is more of a filler card, like we talked about Hydro Surge, Index, Divination. We save this card for later on when we're deck building. It's not something we auto-include. Then we get into cards like Sphinx of Uthun. So Sphinx of Uthun is a great card. He's really late game. He's 7 mana, and this is a lot of mana to be casting for just 1 creature. But 5/6 flying whenever he enters the battlefield. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Your opponent has to separate them into 2 piles. You get to keep 1 pile of your choice, and the other pile goes to the graveyard. So ultimately, he lets you draw a little bit in an essence. So he's a good card, but the high mana cost is what oftentimes deters players. And then we have Arctic Aven. So Arctic Aven is a 2/1 for 3 mana. Flying gets +1/+1 as long as you control planes. And for 1 white, he can gain lifelink. So definitely an option if we're going to be going with blue and white, because we want to take advantage of that lifelink. So our blue looks really solid so far, but we're not going to make any solid choices right now. We're going to take a look at what else we have for our other colors. Alright, so next we are taking a look at black. So we're going to do the same thing with black. We're going to separate the creatures from the instants and sorceries that we have, and also enchantments, stuff like that. And take a look at what all we have. So for our instants, sorceries, enchantments, and everything non-creatures, we have Dark Favor, which is a really good card for black. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we lose 1 life. Enchanted creature gets +3/+1. Very solid. We have Mind Rot, which is a filler card, which is something we're going to save for after we get the bulk of our deck underway. Target player discards 2 cards. Definitely not something that we need to have in the deck, but it's a nice convenience that we can use. Crippling Blight, also another more filler-oriented card. Definitely something that isn't bad, because for 1 black mana, it can give target creature -1/-1, and it can't block. Sometimes that could mean destroying a creature totally, but more times than not, it's going to make a creature unable to block, which is convenient. And Wit's End, this card is very expensive, and a lot of times players will look at a card like this one and think, wow, this card is really good. But you have to look at the card and see how good it will be by the time that you get to use it. So Wit's End, it's 7 mana 5 generic and double black. Target player discards his or her hand. Now, between a card like Mind Rot, which discards 2 cards, and a card like Wit's End, which discards all cards, you have to see which one's going to be better. In this situation, and almost every situation, Mind Rot is going to be better because it's less mana, it's still going to let you discard 2 of their cards, and you're not going to have to waste all of that mana into Wit's End. It's going to leave you more mana open for another card that you could play per turn. 7 mana is really expensive for a card like Wit's End to not do something really tremendous to the game. Sure, if you have a lot of removal and your opponent doesn't have any cards in a hand, it could be a little bit better, but Wit's End is definitely a card that you don't want to rush right into and think, oh, I definitely need to play this card because it's expensive mana. Then we have Harbor Bandit. He gets +1/+1 as long as you control an island, so it would be convenient if we were playing blue and black and also maybe white, but we'll take a look at that later. So he could be a 3/3 and he can also give himself unblockable. Giant Scorpion is definitely good, and I think we got 2 of them. So Giant Scorpion has Death Touch. It's a really good way of deterring other aggro. So 3 mana, 1/3, Death Touch, very solid, and we have 2 of them. We have Veiled Worn Ghoul, so 4/1 for 5 mana, can't block, and whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under our control, we can return it from our graveyard to our hand. Not necessarily something that's an auto-include as far as creatures go, but he's not bad. Zombie Goliath, he's actually a pretty solid card. He is something more along the A spectrum of Bread, where we're looking for aggro and solid attackers. For 5 mana, you get a 4/3. He's pretty solid. Same goes with Walking Corpse. It's more of a type of card. It's a 2/2 for 2 mana. Not something we need straightforwardly right off the deck building, but definitely something we can include later down the line. We have another Zombie Goliath. Vampire Nighthawk, this is definitely one of the more auto-include type cards. So he's a 2/3 for 3 mana, Flying Death Touch Lifelink. 1 generic and double black. The Death Touch and Lifelink makes him a absolutely incredible card that you want to include in a deck like this one. And then we have Plactory Lich. So Plactory Lich, again, it's another rare that has a very specific cost to it. So for 3 mana, it's 3 black, which makes it really hard to cast if we're running multiple colors, which usually you're going to want to run 2 colors, if not maybe 3. 3 sometimes is pushing it. But 3 black is sometimes a little bit extensive unless you're running mono black. He's a 5/5, enters the battlefield, and you put a counter on an artifact you control. He's indestructible, and when you control no permanents with the Plactory counter on them, sacrifice Plactory Lich. So he's relying on you having that artifact out with the counter on it, and if your opponent destroys it, you're kind of screwed and you lose your 5/5. But he's a conditional card that you want to have the appropriate cards to actually work around. So we have that. Then we have our green cards, so we're going to take a look at these. We're going to break these down into creatures and also other spells that we have. Primal Hunt Beasts and Ranger's Paths. So with the Ranger's Path, we're going to start off with that first. For 4 mana, search your library for 2 forest cards and put them onto the battlefield. Tap, shuffle your library. It does thin out your deck for 4 mana out of 2 lands that you're not going to have to search for, but at the same time, it's expensive. And this is a card that you want to wait for after you get your creatures out of the way and the bulk of your deck. Prey Upon. Prey Upon is a very good card. For 1 green, target creature you control fights another target creature you don't control, so they deal damage equal to their power to each other. It's a great way if you have really big creatures to get rid of smaller creatures. This is one of the cards that is definitely something you want to wait until you know you have enough creatures that it would be good, but it's definitely one of the first cards that you want to consider putting into your deck. Boundless Realms, it's 7 mana, source, research your library for X basic land cards, where X is the number of lands you control, and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Again, this is an expensive card like Wit's End that doesn't give you much benefit, and it's definitely something you need to watch out because a lot of newer players will rush into a card like this one and not really think that for 7 mana they could be running something better like a just a plain creature like a 6/6 for 7 or something like that would be better than Boundless Realms, even though it gets the bulk of your lands out of your deck, which a lot of people would debate. Now we have Predatory Rampage, so 5 mana, creatures you control get +3/+3 until the end of the turn. Each creature your opponent controls blocks this turn if able, so definitely a really good card like the Prey Upon that we looked at. Definitely something that we want to include if we're playing green, or even if we're splashing green on top of a lot of creatures. Bountiful Harvest, you gain 1 life for each land you control. It's not a bad card, definitely something you want to take a look at later, but it's 5 mana. And Revive, very specific card. If we're playing heavy green, we are going to be using it. If not, it's something we just turn away from. Something we just really don't need unless we run heavy green. For our creatures, we have some Primal Hunt Beasts, 4 mana, 3/3 with Hexproof. He's a pretty solid card to have. Pretty solid creature. Yavis Force Mage, 2/2 for 3 mana, enters the battlefield and target creature gets +2/+2. It's a good, more filler-oriented card. It's definitely really solid because you still get a 2/2 creature for 3, and it does help you out for 1 turn, but unless you have some abilities that let you keep on having that creature re-enter the battlefield, or bounce it back to your hand and re-enter the battlefield, the most that you're going to see out of it is the turn that it comes in. Deadly Recluse, definitely a really good card. 1/2 for 2 mana, reach Death Touch, really good. Acidic Slime as well for 5 mana, you get a 2/2, but his effects pretty much outweigh his 5 cost for a 2/2. He has Death Touch, which is going to deter a little bit of ground aggro, and whenever he enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Monvoli Beast Tracker, so whenever he enters the battlefield, search our library for a creature with Death Touch, Hexproof, Reach, or Trample, reveal him and put him into our hands. So we could search for the Primal Hunt Beast, Acidic Slimes, or any other cards in other colors that we have. Timber Pack Wolf, since we only pulled one of these, he would be a very plain card. He's a 2/2 for 2 mana, gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control named Timber Pack Wolf, which at most would just be 1. So he would get no other benefits from that. And then we have Bond Beetle, which is a 0/1 for 1 green mana. It enters the battlefield and put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. He is a filler card. This is something we save for later deck building, and definitely not something that is an auto include. From there, we're going to look at red. We're going to save artifacts for last. For red, it seems like we have a lot of red cards. A little bit of solid removal. Turn to Slag is a very solid card. Playtesting Boar is good as well. Cleaver Ride is very good to build around after you get your creatures. Krenko's Command is not bad. Slumbering Dragon, Crimson Muckrader, Wall of Fire, and turn to Slag again. So for our removal is very important in Limited. We have 2 Turn to Slag, which is for 5 mana. It deals 5 damage to target creature and destroy all equipment attached to that creature. So it's a fairly good way to remove one creature that's annoying off the battlefield, and it's definitely something to consider whenever we are looking for ways to get rid of our opponent's creatures. We also have Krenko's Command, which is 2 mana sorcery, put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. It's a fairly good way to gain blockers. Cleaver Riot, once we have enough creatures to base a deck around, creatures we control gain double strike until the end of the turn. Kindled Fury, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains first strike until the end of the turn for 1 red mana. It's a combat shenanigan, and it's definitely something we want to save for later. It's definitely not something that's like an auto-include like Turn to Slag. From here, taking a look at the creatures, it seems like we only have 1 Wall of Fire. Wall of Fire is fairly good. It's a 0/5 for 3 mana defender, and for 1 red it gets +1/+0 until the end of the turn, so it could be a good blocker. Seems like we also have 1 Crimson Muckrader, only just 1. So it is a 2 cost, 2/1, +1/+1, as long as we control a swamp and he can regenerate. So if we're running black, he would be good. Slumbering Dragon, also a fairly good card. For 1 red mana, you get a 3/3 with flying. Can't attack or block unless it has 5 or more +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, he gets a +1/+1 counter. So he can become fairly big fairly quick, and your opponent has to deal with them. Definitely something we could consider basing a deck around. From there, we have some Rummaging Goblins. I believe two. Yeah, two Rummaging Goblins. So 3 cost, 1/1, tap, discard a card, draw a card. These are good for more filler type creatures where we're going to be able to draw more off of cards. Blade Test Boar is also a really good card as far as evasion goes because it has Intimidate, 3/2 for 4 mana. The Intimidate makes him really awesome because he's not going to be able to be blocked except by red creatures or artifact creatures. Goblin Arsonist, we have 2 of these. This is a good card as well for 1 red, but he's definitely not something that we want to include right away. 1/1 for 1 red mana. Whenever he dies, he deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So early game he's nice, late game he's not really good because your opponent's going to have creatures that are bigger than 2 power, 2 toughness, should I say. Mog Flunkies, fairly good card as well. 3/3 for 2 mana, can attack or block alone. So if we have a lot of creatures, which in this case we have pulled a lot of them, we can base a pretty solid deck around this guy and get him out for very cheap mana and deal a lot of damage. Then we have Canyon Minotaur, which is a 4 cost, 3/3, pretty plain card. Fire Elemental, 5/4 for 5 mana, again another plain card. Reckless Brute, 3 mana, 3/1 with haste, attacks each turn if able. He has his conditions where he's good and bad, but overall he's a pretty fair card. Alright, so from there we're going to take a look at white. In white we have Divine Verdict, Angelic Benediction, Angel's Mercy, another Angel's Mercy, Safe Passage, and Captain's Call. Okay, so for our instants and sorceries, because we got 2 of them, we have Safe Passage, which for 3 mana prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control. Definitely a really good combat shenanigan that we can do in a deck, especially if we have a lot of creatures. 2 Angel's Mercy. Angel's Mercy is a good card, but it is a filler card because we want to have, like I keep on saying, we want to have this after we have our deck under the way. But if we have an outlet for white mana, gaining 7 life can mean the difference in a aggro matchup. Aggro versus aggro, we have the upper hand there. Captain's Call, another 4 cost card, and it produces 3 blockers for us, which is good. Angelic Benediction, also another really great card, even if we're splashing white because it's only 1 white to cast. Exalted, whenever a creature we control attacks alone, we can tap target creature. Divine Verdict, also another source of really awesome removal. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature for 4 mana. Really awesome. Alright, so we have that. From there, our creatures aren't really as diverse as the other colors, so we may consider using our instants and sorceries from white and the creatures from another color, but it seems like everything's kind of a one-of. So Aven Squire, 1/1 for 2 mana, flying and exalted, so if he's attacking alone, it gives him a benefit. Attended Knight for 3 mana, it's a 2/2 first strike. Whenever it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 white soldier token onto the battlefield. A Johnny Sunstriker, 2/2 for 2 white with lifelink. If we're not playing a lot of white, it may be hard to cast him, so we want to pay attention to that as well. Warclamp Mastiff, did we get more? Yeah, we got 2 Warclamp Mastiffs. So this is a fairly big mistake that a lot of players make with including multiple copies of this card. While the First Strike makes it a fairly good card early game, late game it ends up being a pretty dead card because it's still a 1/1 with First Strike and it's not really going to do anything against bigger creatures that your opponent may have. So it's something to not really want to consider including in the deck right away. Crusader of Ojik, fairly solid card, especially if we're making a lot of creatures come out. 3 cost, 2 generic, 1 white, power and toughness equal to the amount of creatures we control. Guardians of Akarsa, 3 cost defender with Exalted, and it's a 0/4, giving benefit to a creature that's attacking alone. Silvercoat Lion, again another filler card. He's a pretty plain 2/2 for 2. And Battleflight Eagle, which is a 2/2 for 5 mana, 4 generic, 1 white, flying. Enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2/+2, and gains flying until the end of the turn. So pretty expensive for the cost, but sometimes it ends up working well for us. And then we have our artifacts, which we have a couple of rings here. We have 3 rings. So we have the green ring, Ring of Colonia. We have the white ring, Ring of Thune. And we have Ring of Zathrid, which Ring of Zathrid is a really good card, even if we're not running something like black necessarily as the main color for our creatures or anything like that. Because of the regenerate is a really huge and awesome thing to have in the limited format. So the ring is good. Also, Ring of Thune and Ring of Colonia are also pretty good. Colonia gives trample, Ring of Thune gives vigilance. Vigilance is really awesome, but I think if I had to choose 2 to actually run in a deck, even regardless of the colors of creatures I'm using, it would probably be Ring of Zathrid and Ring of Thune. Then we have Phyrexian Hulk, so he's a fairly plain card, 5/4 for 6 mana, something we can include after we get everything out of the way. And Elixir of Immortality, which is fairly good as well for gaining back life and reshuffling our graveyard into our library, and also gaining a little bit of life. 5 life is pretty fair for the 3 mana that we're using total to use the ability. So 1 to cast, 2 to activate, tap, and shuffle up everything. So now we're going to take a look at each color and see what's worth playing in each one. And I know this video is going to be a little bit lengthy, but you get 30 minutes usually. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, 30 minutes to like 50 minutes for deck construction, depending on where you play. I usually have 30 minutes for it, but you get 30 minutes to 50 minutes for deck construction, and you really want to pay attention to some of this stuff and try to figure out what the best strategy is. So in blue, the creatures worth running would probably be Aven, or the Arctic Aven, Sphinx of Uthune. The Wind Drakes are definitely really good, the 3 of them. They're worth running as definite main board cards. Archaeomancer is also very good if we're able to use enough instants and sorceries around it. With that, I would probably say those are the strongest creatures. We'll take a look at the creatures first. These are probably the strongest creatures out of blue that we have. And also probably the Welkin turn. Fogbank as well. Fogbank is good. For green, cards that are definitely auto-includes would be stuff like Acidic Slime, Deadly Recluse. Abyss Force Mage is pretty good. Primal Hunt Beasts are good. Predatory Rampage is another great card, but as far as creatures go, these are the ones that we're looking at for green, so not a huge amount of creatures for green. For, if I can pick them up, for red, we have Fire Elemental, which is really solid. The 2 Mog Flunkies, which are pretty balanced. Goblin Arsonists are a little bit more filler. Playtesting Boars, very good. The Rummaging Goblins are fairly filler as well. Slumbering Dragon is good. Crimson Muckwader is good if we can find the black mana for the regenerate. And Wall of Fire it's alright. It's a good card. As for black, definitely Vampire Nighthawk. Vampire Nighthawk is incredibly good. The 2 Giant Scorpions are worth running. And Harbor Bandit is good if we're running blue. So those are our creatures that we really want to see play with. Zombie Goliath is good, but the 3 toughness makes it sometimes a little bit more variable. As we saw with Plactory Lich, we have that requirement with artifacts that we have to have other artifacts in order for him to be really good, but that's not necessarily something we look for with a card with big drawbacks like that. For white, definitely Crusader of Odric. Johnny Sunstriker if we're going very heavy white. Attended Knight is also good. Aven Squire is good. And Guardians of Akrasa. Guardians of Akrasa is good. And those look like the bulk of the white creatures that we have. So those are our whites. Our reds look very, very solid. We have a lot of red cards. Our green is pretty much fairly the same with white. It looks like we may go 3 colors for this one, even though our black isn't as good for creatures. And our blue is very good for creatures, especially with removal. So our blue for creatures is very heavy, especially with some evasion, which is one of the key important things about Limited. So it looks like we're definitely running blue in some sort of form. Our creatures look really solid. Red looks pretty good. Our green is alright. But I think the best thing to go from here would probably be blue, red, because we have a decent amount of cards to select from there as well in the removal packages as well. And then from there, maybe a little bit of white or maybe even green. We could go green as well. For white, we have Divine Verdict, which is a great removal card. Captain's Call, which we could use Archaeomancer to get back. Angel's Mercy, which is a little bit of a stretch. Again, Captain's Call and Angel's Mercy are a little bit of a stretch. Safe Passage also isn't bad for combat shenanigans, but it's not going to get us very far with overwhelming game finishers. For green, however, green has very awesome cards in the sense of Prey Upon. Prey Upon can be very good. Predatory Rampage, especially with Archaeomancer, can be good. But again, that one's a little bit more splash oriented. If we were going to go with anything, I think green would be a splash, so we could use a card like Predatory Rampage and also Prey Upon wouldn't be bad. Or we could just go solid blue and red. Looking through red, we have Krenko's Command, 2 Turn to Slags, which would be very worth running, so those cards would definitely be worth the interaction with Archaeomancer. So those cards are worth it. For black, I don't think black really had anything. Yeah, black really doesn't have anything worth running in instants and sorceries, especially because we're running so many Archaeomancers. So it's looking like it's green. Green has some nice stuff that we want. But then again, white has some nice stuff as well. It really does end up being a hard call with some of this stuff and what we want to run. But ultimately, if we just kind of look at things a little bit better, the creatures are fairly solid. I think if anything, we could go green, blue, and red. Green, blue, and red would be good. So from there, we're just going to put our whites and our blacks kind of to the side here and take a look at what we're going to be playing for our green, white, or our green, blue, and red cards. Alright, so from here we're going to look at auto-include cards. As far as auto-include goes, with blue, we're definitely going to want to have interactions with Archaeomancer. Windrake is definitely good because he has flying. He can get around a lot of different creatures. Arctic Aven isn't really going to be a huge card that we need to run because we're not running white, so we might have a little bit of a... it's not going to be as good as it could be if we could give it lifelink, so that's going to be kind of a drawback to it. Fogbank is definitely still worth running in terms of a card. Sphinx of Uthun should also be a fairly good card late game because it's 7 mana. Welkin Turn, also flying, makes it pretty good. For red, I would probably say Slumbering Dragon is really awesome card. You get a 3/3 for 1 mana. It has flying, which is going to be nice evasion, and it's going to restrict your opponent's attacks just a little bit. It's not going to make them flat out not attack, but it's going to make them be a little bit more cautious because once he gets his 5+1/+1 counters, he's going to be something that your opponent has to deal with. Also from there, we're going to use cards like Mog Flunkies, where Mog Flunkies can't attack or block alone, but because we have a lot of solid flying creatures and stuff that we can get onto the battlefield, we can have it attack efficiently. Blade Tusk Boar is also a solid card. Wall of Fire may be something that we can consider later. Crimson Muckwader, we don't really get a benefit because we're not running black. And Fire Elemental, it could be a solid card. We'll take a look at that in a second. So right off the bat here, we have 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we have 13 creatures here. So 17 lands, 13 creatures. That gives us 30. That would give us leeway for 10 instants and sorceries, which will be good. We want to have a little bit more. In terms of creatures and stuff. So let's look at what we have in green. So we can kind of include, I would probably say 3 more creatures, if anything. So it doesn't look like there's really a whole lot to run out of green in terms of creatures. Nothing that'll be a blowout. So maybe from there we might not even run green even though we have Predatory Rampage. So this is kind of the thought process between dropping colors and picking what we actually want to run. So from there we might consider running 3 more creatures. Blue doesn't really have a lot. Red does have Fire Elemental, which is a very good 5-drop card. We could also consider running Canyon Minotaur because he's a 3/3 solid body Wall of Fire. Cards that we could reoccur with Archaeomancer, the 2-turn to Slags, Karenko's Command. Goblin Arsonists also wouldn't be bad. We'll see what we'll do with those. Creatures we control gain double strike with Cleaver Riot, so that could be a decent card, but we don't necessarily need it. Kindled Fury, especially with Archaeomancer, because we can reoccur it, wouldn't be bad. So we'll see that. Any instance out of here that we're worth running, Divination would be good, now that we're getting into our later stages of deck building. Index is also going to be really good, looking at the top 5 cards, making sure that we get our land drops and also adequate creatures. Hydro Surge is a little bit of a stretch, but it's not a bad card. It's more Combat Shenanigans, and if I had to choose Combat Shenanigan, it would probably be Kindled Fury. So from here, we have probably more than 10 cards, so 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. So we have 11. So what will we cut out of here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 instants or sorceries, so we kind of maybe want to run something a little bit more. So maybe we will cut out, I think, Wall of Fire. Nah. Yeah, Wall of Fire and maybe 1 more Arsonist, because it ends up being a little bit of a dead draw later on. We'll take out the 2 of those. Yeah, we'll take out the 2 of those because Canyon Minotaur can actually attack, aside from the Defender. Goblin Arsonist is still fairly good. And then we'll try to run Hydro Surge, so that'll give us 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 cards. That gives us, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So 23, these are going to be our actual spells that we're going to be casting for our deck. So now we are actually going to take a look at how we are going to make our mana base for this deck. Alright, so now we're at the portion where we are actually going to calculate how we are going to do the lands for this deck. Now, even before we get to that, we have to map out and see if this is adequately good enough for being able to run this deck. So what we're going to do is we're going to map out these cards based on their converted mana cost. So we're going to go cheapest to most expensive, starting with 1. So we're going to take all of our 1 cost cards. And what you want to do with this is see if there's a spike in the middle. So you should have a couple of 1 costs, couple of 5 costs, but ultimately the 3s and 4s should be the heaviest. So it'll spike up. It'll be a couple of 1s, even more 2s, and then just kind of gradually get up to the 3s and 4s, and then go down and decline. So we'll see if it does exactly that, and it seems to be working to an extent in that fashion. It doesn't need to be exactly spiking right away, but as long as it curves up and gives us some fair increase in converted mana costs, we'll be fine. So we're going to map these out here and see our threes. So it's a pretty equal. We have five ones, 5 2s, 4 3s. Our 4s seem to be a little bit higher. We have our 1 7, which is kind of like an outlier there. Some more 4s. Another 4 and a 5 again. So it's a fairly good curve. It's not perfect. I definitely think we could switch some things. We also didn't look at our artifacts here. So we could possibly take our artifacts, which we have over in the side here, and see what we could switch out. So the Ring of Zathard and the Ring of Thune would definitely be something worth considering to run in a build like this one. From there, we could possibly take out maybe Hydro Surge, maybe Kindled Fury. They're both fairly decent cards, but I think we would ultimately get a little bit more of a benefit if we maybe took out Hydro Surge. We'll take out Hydro Surge, even at the risk of getting a little bit less synergy from Archaeomancer. Archaeomancer is still going to be useful, even if we're getting back something that we can use situationally. So we'll take out the Hydro Surge, and we'll maybe consider running probably Ring of Thune. Ring of Thune is a little bit better in this case because we want to have our creatures where they're going to be attackers and blockers possibly, because they have that evasion, and the vigilance is going to make it really nice for them, even though we're not running white. And same with Ring of Zathard, we're not running black. But Ring of Zathard requires you to actually pay mana to activate the regenerate for it. Even though it's generic, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive. I would actually prefer Ring of Thune. Some people would prefer Ring of Zathard. That's from person to person, and my call would be Ring of Thune. With our vigilance, it makes things a little bit less situational if we have to have a blocker. So from here we see that it's a little bit better. Our 1-drops are now 1 less, and our 2-drops are 1 more. 3's dip down a little bit, so it's going 4, 6, 4, 5, 3, 1. So that's a fairly good curve. Ideally, we want to have it where our 3's are going to be a little bit higher, then our 4's are going to dip down a little bit, and then 5's and anything later on is going to just kind of dwindle down. But this is a very good curve. It works very well. It would function very properly. And now we are actually going to calculate how many lands of each we are going to use. So the way we do that is we separate our cards based on their color. So we're going to have all of our reds and all of our blues in 2 piles. And we're going to see. So now an important thing that we're going to want to have here is an ability to count up all of the total instances of specific mana that we're going to need. So early on, it looks like for blue we're not going to need very much. But then when we get to like turn 4, we're going to need some double colors. Same goes kind of with turn to slag, fire elemental. Those are going to be a little bit more expensive to cast. The Canyon Minotaurs, Mog Flunkies are going to be fairly easy to use. Kindled Furies, Slumbering Dragon, Goblin Arsonist. Red seems to have a little bit more of a need to be earlier on. But total we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 red cards. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 blue cards. So it's fairly split there, and we have 1 ring. So our 1 artifact that we're running in the deck. So from here, we have 17 lands that we're going to be running. So for blue, Really, the only cards that we're going to need to have double colors for are going to be Archaeomancer and Sphinx of Uthun. So we have 4 total cards that we're going to need double colors for. Our red is a little bit more prominent because we have a lot more 1-drops. Blue has Index, but we have Kindled Fury, Slumbering Dragon, Goblin Arsonist. Even though Kindled Fury isn't exactly the right-away card, it's still going to be something that we need the red mana early for. And Turn to Slag, Fire Elemental, we need double colors for that. So I would probably say that for the mana base, we would go 8 and 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 of these. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mountains. So that's giving us 16. And we just need to decide which land is going to have one more. Now, because red needs the mana earlier because of cards like Slumbering Dragon, in this case we would add one more mountain to give us 9, and then the islands would be 8. So we're going to do it that way, giving us total 40 cards. So that is the main deck. Now let's see if there's anything worth sideboarding. Alright, so we'll put that all off to the side and try to wrap this up pretty shortly. Then we have cards like Negate. Negate's definitely sideboard worthy. And out of red doesn't seem like very much. Maybe if we're running up against a lot of ground threats, Wall of Fire. Goblin Arsonist would be good if they have a lot of 1 toughness creatures. It's something to consider. And if we need combat shenanigans, Cleaver Riot will be good. But ultimately, those would be the 4 main cards that we would sideboard in and out. So that is the deck. Okay, so now that we have our deck built, we're just going to do one quick playtest here. We're just going to draw 7. I just pile shuffled this. I just kept on listing out cards into 5 piles and I just distributed that way. So now we are going to take a look at our opening 7 cards that we would have and just kind of play out our first like 2 or 3 turns just to see how the deck works. So right off the bat we have Windrake, Fogbank, Mog Flunkies, fairly good start. Canyon Minotaurs turn 4, Archaeomancer turn 4 as well. So first turn we would go mountain or island, it really wouldn't matter. Next turn we would draw, have another land drop, probably go into the Mog Flunkies. From there, untap, draw. We have our play our island. From there we can play the Windrake. Play him. Obviously can't attack with Mog Flunkies right now. And then we would pass, obviously tapping for Windrake. Untap, draw. We have another Mog Flunky, so we would swing in with both of them. Hopefully dealing 5 damage to our opponent. Then we can either play our Fogbank or Mog Flunkies again, depending on what we have. But it's a fairly good start. We have a lot of solid creatures and a lot of ways to deal damage really early on. Just to look at the next couple of cards, we have a Mountain giving us a 4-drop. Divination, which would let us draw into another 2 cards. Archaeomancer, which could get us back Divination. Some more lands. Ring of Thune, which is pretty solid. And we just basically keep on going. So that in a nutshell is how to build a sealed deck. So it was a pretty lengthy video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you watched through this entire video, I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it knowledgeable and can actually learn from this. If you did, I would be really pleased if you guys like this video, favorite it, and subscribe to the channel for more Magic the Gathering related instructional videos and other kind of fun stuff. And please be sure to share this video with your friends to let them know if they need some help with playing sealed deck. But until next time, guys, have a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.